In this session, I want to talk to you about, you have all these tools, skills, strategies, tactics, approaches to turning on your business. How many got, if you stop right now, more than enough to take your business to a whole nother level? Raise your hand and say, "I." So as we talked about before, knowing what to do is very different than doing what you know. And when something is new, you don't know it quite as well. So there tends to be even more hesitancy. So part of what we're doing in this compression, by you being in this environment, is putting you in a position where day and night you're thinking about this stuff, and it starts to amalgamate, it starts to connect. Because as your brain gets overloaded, the beauty of that is your conscious mind kind of disappears a little bit, and your unconscious starts to take over. And that's the part of your brain that makes your heart beat 100,000 times a day without you having to think about it. So immersion has that power. That's the beauty of what we're doing. And then many of you are going to get this program, you're going to go back through it a step at a time, and you're going to repeat it. You're going to do that spaced repetition by way of video or audio or some combination of it, maybe using net time, no extra time. So listening to it maybe while you're working out, things of that nature. You'll embed it even more. So let's just assume you organize things well, and we're going to make sure tomorrow you leave with a real clear plan. The plan's in front of you. It's all ready to rock and roll. What is the single most powerful constraint as to whether or not your business is going to grow or not? What is it? Me, meaning the business owner, yourself. And if you're not the business owner, the biggest constraint that you have an impact on is yourself. And as you heard yesterday when we talked and looked at HomeX's example, I mean, here's a company that's growing leaps and bounds in a multi-billion-dollar business, traveling around the world. The economies are tearing apart in many places, and it's growing. But the constraint that they saw was the vision of the founder, what they were willing to believe is possible. And the great thing about them is, like, we didn't know. We didn't know it wasn't possible. That's a very helpful thing not to know, just to go out there and do it. How many of you, when you started out in business, didn't know what you couldn't do, and that was quite helpful? Let me see your hand. Say, "I." Me too. If I look back at stuff that I did back then, I think, my God, that's unbelievable. I can't believe I would say that or do that or try that. But what's interesting is in the beginning of your business, and when people are brand new at something, they'll try almost. But if you start to succeed, some of you are later in your life cycle. And so as you start to succeed now, you've got something to lose. And now you don't implement at the same level. You've got something to maintain. You've got something to hang on to. And so you have to be cautious about that. But besides your own vision, the limitations of your belief for vision, which hopefully you've been expanded, how many feel like that has been expanded? If you shout a shadow of a doubt here, say, "I." I know it has, Fair. I can see it. I've had the conversations with you. Each time you hear someone, you see a different perspective, a different way, and you go, my gosh, there's just so many ways to take my business to the next level. I don't have to wait. I don't have to hope for some, quote, good economy. The worst economy is my deepest friend because it's wiping out all my competitors and giving me an opportunity to take market share or become the leader or take their customers or buy them for a song. Selling has kind of an interesting connotation because in our culture, when we think of salespeople, we think of high integrity individuals who have a huge positive influence on the quality of our lives. Tell me the first words you associate to a salesperson, quick. Scumbag, thank you, very nice, scumbag. What else? Manipulator, liar, greasy, deceptive. Guy goes, great guy. Now, how many of you in this room are salespeople? Let me see your hands. If you're an owner of a business, you better be raising your hand. If you are a parent, you better be raising your hand. Because by the way, are kids great salespeople, yes or no? I mean, you don't have to teach them how to deal with rejection. They just let it pass on by and keep coming, right? You can't have an ice cream cone, 10 minutes later they're licking on one with a smile on their face, right? No one taught them any scripts. No one taught them anything. What I want you to get is that the single most important skill in life, we hate the word selling, so I'll give you a word that it really is that doesn't have the negative connotation. It's the word that all leaders have. What would that word be? Influence. What changes companies is leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I want to change a company that I own and I want to make a shift in that company, the number one thing I'm going to do is shifting leadership. That might be taking leaders to a different level. That might bring new leaders in. That might be new leaders of new voices with new perspectives. with new skill sets, new directions, but we need to take things to another level. Leaders solve problems and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself or it would already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence. True? If you're going to get people to maximize resources, that requires influence. If you're going to get people to partner with you, provide you resources, capital, suppliers, anything, that requires influence. If you're going to have an impact on your kids or your community or the world, that requires influence. There is no more important skill of leadership than influence. And yet most of us think of it like selling, and as a result, we don't master influence. So I'm not here today to try and get you to become a master of influence in 45 minutes or so. Am I chatting with you here because we have so many of the speakers. This is the area of life I am most focused on. Because I know that if you can't influence, you can't lead. But if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, there's no limit to whatever you can envision and what you can make real. And if your influence becomes not just you as the influence, but you're able to influence systems, people, company, culture. If you can turn other people into influencers, now whatever you vision about can be made into reality. And so as a skill of influence, we got to ask ourselves, how many agree leaders are what change companies? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Say aye. And leaders' number one skill is influence. If you agree, say aye. And then the question becomes, how do you influence? How do you influence consistently with integrity? You can influence many ways. You can do it without integrity. But the good news is we live in a world today where whatever you do, it's transparent to the world because there are no secrets anymore, are there? Try to have a secret today, bless you. You can forget the secret. With the internet, with the culture we have, with the way the world is today, there are no more secrets, and whatever you think is still possible to keep secret, give it 3 or 4 more years and it'll be impossible. Every phone call you make is recorded. There's no single phone call that goes in or out of North America that they don't have a recording of, and they can search by word, by tone, by tempo. They can even recognize voices now. There is no such thing as privacy. Everything you've ever put on the internet is there forever, and people know it and can search it. The way you write is searchable now. You can not sign your email, you can put it on somebody else's email, and the structure of your language and the way you influence things can be studied at this level. So the good news about that is manipulation as an ongoing tool for success is over. But adding value will never go out of style. Truth will never go out of style. So influencing with integrity is the secret. But what really influences people? Do facts and figures, we give you enough facts and figures out of a core story, is that going to influence people? No. It's the weaving of that story together in a way that produces what shifts people. And that's human emotion. Ultimately, the big game here is emotion. You have to influence emotion. You have to influence the emotion of your people. If you're going to maximize resources, and if we all agree, as we talked about the other day, it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of what? Resourcefulness. If you're creative enough, if you're playful enough, if you're determined enough, if you're focused enough, you can find a way. If you're giving enough, if you're generous enough, if you're honest enough, if you're courageous enough, you will get people to help you. You will find the way. You will make that thing happen. You'll access the resource. You get someone to coach you, teach you, loan it to you, let you try it, drive it, experience it. So it's the ability to influence emotion because that's what affects our intellect. That's the bottom line. A core story is only there to give you a set of facts to educate someone that will make them emotional enough to make a decision. And what they do is they go through a series of things that you have emotions about. They may say them in a non-emotional way, but the only reason they work is because you know they're going to open the person's emotion. How many agree with me on this? Say aye. So as leaders, we can never forget that humans are emotional creatures, including ourselves. And to influence other people, we have to know what already influences them. And we can't ever forget what truly influences them. It's going to come down to our ability to connect with them at a deep emotional level or get others to do the same. Here's how I'd say it in a really simple term. To influence someone, you have to already be influenced. Right? To move somebody, you better be moved. To touch somebody, you can't touch somebody about your product or service or vision or idea or your company if you're not touched. To persuade others, you have to be persuaded. You can't give somebody else what you don't have. Now, you may have it intellectually, and here's the challenge. When you first meet somebody in your relationship, and you're all excited. What's the level of energy like? 0 to 10. Make the sound of that energy. You meet somebody you're totally excited by. Make the sound. Everyone. 6 months, 6 years, 20 years later. It's scary, isn't it? And it's not time, because there are people I've been with them, been together 65 years, and they're still out of their mind for each other. They make the same amount of noise you did in the beginning here. What changes is, very often, when you're around something enough, I don't care what it is, there's a law called the law of familiarity. The law of familiarity says this: if you're around something enough, you take it just a little bit for granted. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's not that you don't care, it's that you get used to it. It's that the variety of it is not quite as high. It's not so new, and with that, sometimes you give it less significance. Even though in your heart you know it's significant, you don't keep the aliveness of it. It becomes something you intellectualize versus something you feel inside your body with a passion. So there are people say, but we love each other. Yeah, well, that's great. You know, hug each other every now and then. You say you love each other, little kiss like that. Was that how it was in the beginning? No. It isn't time. It's that most people don't understand that this emotion, this intensity, this passion has to be constantly reinforced every single day. And like any muscle, if you don't use it, So then you have the base understanding of why you do what you do, but you've lost the energy that makes it alive. And so if you're going to be touching people, you got to be touched. So then the question is, how do we influence ourselves? How do we influence other people? We got to get them into their emotions. We got to get ourselves into the emotions that are going to move us to action. And we got to do that ongoing, because otherwise all the stuff you wrote down will die. It'll die in your book. It'll die in your head. There has to be a level of emotion, a level of hunger in you that makes you go follow through. There's got to be a level of energy in you that when you go share it with people, you're able to influence them to follow through. And when they don't do it, enough to get back in there with them again and get them to do it again. This is where the whole game gets won or lost. Do you agree or disagree with me on this? So what we got to look at is, first of all, us. How many of you have days when you wake up and you feel like, I don't want to talk to people today? How many got days like this in your life? Say I. But again, as I said the other day, if you're the leader, you don't have that choice. If you're the leader, you have to get in a good state. If you're the leader, you have to get yourself in that place. And how many of you have had some gut checks? Let me see again in the last 6 months, 12 months in your business with economy changing like it's never changed before. How many have had those gut checks? Say I. So what do? We have to become masters of influence, which means we have to be able to master the state of our own organization. To master the state of our own organization, we've got to know how to change that. How fast, my friends? How fast? And where does it have to start? Ourselves, since we're the first constraint. And if we can do it with ourselves and influence, then we can teach everybody else to influence. We've said business is innovation and marketing. You have to influence people to innovate, because they're not going to just do it because they're used to what works and it's easier and they know it. Innovation means massive what? Change. How many people go, give me more massive change in my life with all the other things I'm trying to hang on to? They're not going to do that. You have to influence people to innovate. And marketing is influence. So, what influences us is our states. How do we change our states? Let's start with you and I and with anybody we're going to work with. You've worked with me before, you know the first answer. If you're going to change somebody's state, the fastest way to do it is physical.